And as mentioned, we're going to talk about our library response to COVID-19 and some of the problems that we face, and of course some of the things that we have done to tackle all these issues. Okay, right. So the outline of our presentation today will be a short introduction of the university and the library, and some sequence of events of COVID-19 in Singapore, and what are our response to all these issues. Of course, I'll mention some problems and some solutions. And we break down into three phases. One is pre-circuit breaker, and the circuit breaker itself where we have a lockdown, and of course the post-circuit breaker and what comes in the future. And lastly, we will be just looking at how we cope with the new norm. Right, so a short introduction. This is some of the intro of our university. The main part that I want to mention is our users. The majority of users are the undergrad and postgrad students, 33,000 of them, and also 4,000 faculties and research staff that we have in the university. Okay, and there are some of the colleges in the university. And our libraries. We have 7 libraries in campus altogether, and most of them are organized by the collection. The overall library space we have is slightly above 15,000 square meters and 2,000 sitting capacity in all the different libraries. Just to mention, one of our libraries is actually run 24/7 unmanned before the COVID situation. Okay, so just a little bit of the happenings during the COVID-19 in Singapore. The first case of COVID-19 local case was reported in January, and subsequently within the next few weeks, the Singapore government actually raises our DORSCON alert to orange in February. Just for your info, the DORSCON is actually a color-coded framework that we use in Singapore for the current disease situation, and the orange is actually the second highest level for this DORSCON alert. And subsequently in March, it was then declared that COVID-19 is an pandemic by the World Health Organization, and our Singapore government then announced a circuit breaker when the situation actually get worsened in Singapore. And at first, this circuit breaker, which is a lockdown, is for a month. Subsequently, as the situation did not really improve, the government then extend for another month to 2 months. So altogether, we have a lockdown of 2 months in Singapore. And the circuit breaker ends in 1st of June, while our university starts commencing the academic year in August. So the first phase, which is the pre-circuit breaker, the period from January to March. So when the first case was reported, our library then began to look for some crisis plans we have or any crisis procedures. And we noticed that some of them are actually not updated because the last crisis that we have is during the SARS period, which is many years ago. So what we did immediately was to update the plans and implemented a business continuity plan. And some of the tasks and items that we have in this continuity plans consist of one, formation of a library crisis management team. And we have a training program for our staff, our fellow librarians in other teams to handle more inquiries. The reason being that our team here actually manage the majority of the inquiries from our users and also an online inquiry system. But because of the on-site preparation work that we need to do because of the crisis, we might not be able to handle the inquiries effectively. So we have to engage other librarians from other teams to help to take over the management of the system and the inquiries. And we also did split our teams out so that we don't have all of us grouping together in case of spreading of the disease if any of us get it. And we created alternative workspace just in case we need to split our teams. We have place in other libraries to work with. And we developed some procedures in our libraries so that if any users who are sick in the libraries will know what to do. And comes to the next point where majority of our course reserve were actually in physical format. So what we did was we have a workflow specifically to source and purchase format of the course reserve, the course textbooks, just in case that the government announced a lockdown, which eventually did happen. Our students are still able to access to these e-textbooks because we then have all these e-textbooks available for the student. Okay, so when the government raises the DOSCON alerts to orange, our university started to implement contact tracing processes, and libraries is needed to assist the university in this effort. So what we have done is we created a in-house system that records our users' data in all our libraries. So this is to help to facilitate contact tracing if necessary. And also, I mentioned that we have a library that is 24/7. Because of this tracking of users, we cannot then unmanned 24/7 library, so we convert it into a normal operating hours for this library outpost. And the next phase is when the COVID-19 is then declared as an pandemic. So what the university did was implemented a stricter measures, okay, social distancing measures, and what the library needs to do is to space out our users when they're in the library to adhere to the stricter social distancing measures. And we have to quickly then reduce our seating capacity in all the libraries within a short period of time, which we did in a week. So what we did during that period is we have to find a lot of space in order to keep all the chairs that we need to remove, because the best way to reduce the space, reduce the user space, is to remove the chairs from the library, and also to mark on tables to indicate that those spaces are not available for users. So within that 1 week, we managed to reduce our seating capacity by 30% across all libraries. Okay, so what you see here is on the left bottom is the system that we use to track our users, to collect the data of our users. So what they need to do is they need to tap their matrix or staff card whenever they enter or exit the library, and we will capture their information. And we also work with our communication and outreach team to design some posters, some notices to put around all the libraries to remind our users to actually to remind them what are the measures that we have within the library. Yep, these are some of the pictures that we have after we have done all the measures or the removal of furniture and spacing out of furniture. So you see that the students are actually sitting quite far apart within the libraries, and some of our study carrels are actually spaced out. So users are being seated quite apart due to the social distancing measures. Okay, right. Okay, so now I will hand over to my colleague Samantha to continue with the presentation. Samantha?
Okay, thank you, Alan. So now I will be talking about what happened during lockdown and then afterwards. Okay, so as Alan mentioned earlier, the Singapore government announced a lockdown in late March, early April. It announced it on a Friday, and so on Monday the university was closed, and we had to figure out how to do all of this within like the weekend or the week after. We had to find a way how to care for our plants and the fish in the library. You can see our fish tank in the picture below, and so we had to request special permission just to go back and clear the fish tank so that there won't be dead fish when we come back. And okay, so we also, as we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of titles that we have that are in physical format, and we because of our plan BCP, our business continuity plan earlier, we now had a process of buying these e-copies if we needed them. So upon request, if a student needed them for their exams or assignments, we already had to go ahead to buy them. And for because of the lockdown, no one was really allowed to travel anywhere. Majority of our users are not allowed to return their books, so we just extended all of their loans indefinitely, and we also send them reminders that they don't have to worry about all this. On the flip side, we had quite a substantial amount of students who were either exchange students or they weren't local, and therefore they wanted to return their books before they flew off back to their home country. So there was an issue of overflowing book bins right after the exam period ended, and therefore we had to go and ask for special permission to go back and clear the book bins. Okay. Okay, so other things during our lockdown, membership, our external members actually only are able to access the library's resources physically on site in our library. Even the e-resources would have to be accessed physically on site. So it really didn't make sense for them during the lockdown, and we gave them a 3-month extension. All workshops prior to the lockdown, they still were able to be conducted physically, well, most of them were conducted physically. But once the lockdown happened, that obviously couldn't continue. So all of them were all quite seamlessly moved to virtual platforms, and we just carried on with our planned workshops from there. Occasionally during the lockdown, we would face very interesting requests from users, things that we did not expect. And so these are 2 examples. One was where a student insisted on us opening the library just so they could borrow a DVD for an assignment. And so to counter this, we spoke to their professor and see what other ways we can support them for their assignment instead. And one of the exchange students didn't know how to return the book and just wanted to keep it and didn't mind paying for it. But our solution to that was to have them directly mail it to one of the librarians before they left. Okay, during the lockdown, it was very important to us to let our users know that they can still contact us and our services are still there for them. So we worked closely with our comms and outreach team to come up with posters, web banners, things that we can put on our social media and get the word out to our users that they didn't have to worry about their loans. Our library services are still ongoing. If they needed like research consultations, they were still available. If they had any questions, how do they contact us? And also during the COVID period, a lot of the publishers started opening up their material to be open access, and we wanted to let our users know that all this research is suddenly now available to them, and all the workshops and everything that we still had going on were going on as planned. If they had the time and they were interested, they can still sign up for them. All right, so post circuit breaker, after lockdown, lockdown ended on 1st of June. We were back open 2nd of June. The government actually had a lot of restrictions right after lockdown because they were trying to be cautious. So there was a lot of restrictions on movement and gatherings, and this thing called safe entry, this thing we have in Singapore now, which basically anytime you go into a building, you have to check in. And this is so that in the case where someone comes down with COVID, then the government will be able to track and notify people who may be infected with the virus. Yeah, so that we also had to help in the safe entry efforts in the university as well. Okay, then on the university level, they had more stringent safety measures we had to implement, as well as disinfection measures. But they did announce quite early on that the August semester would still carry on. All lectures would be online. Tutorials and lab sessions would be in person because those were involving smaller groups of people and they could be sufficiently spread out in tutorial rooms. On the library side, what we did to comply with all of these and have our own safety measures, we progressively opened our libraries after the 2 months, over 2 months. So we opened our biggest library first and then slowly moved onwards. And we also had to constantly patrol the libraries to ensure that everyone was following these government and university directives. Book paging was encouraged. If a user wanted a book that was in another library that had not opened yet, the first thing we do is we would check if there was an e-copy available somewhere. Otherwise, we would go and get the book for them and notify them when they can come down and collect it. We were trying to minimize as much as possible them coming to campus. We also decided that all collaborative areas had to be closed. So any group study areas, all of them were all closed. And all return items would be quarantined. We're still doing that now. Yep. Okay, right. So these are some of the posters and signages that we have around the library to remind our users to always wear their mask, sanitize your hands if you use our self-check machines, and then only approach the service desk if they have inquiries. This is both to protect the users as well as our frontline library staff. Okay. Right. So these are the more interesting things that we are doing now that we are coping with the new normal. We have limited occupancy in the libraries. We've always had an overcrowding problem. I'm sure this is common. And so we have developed a heat map based off of the contact tracing program that Ellen shared earlier. Now that we can track how many users are in the libraries, we have used it to show seat availability. And from there, users can decide if they still want to visit this library or they can go somewhere else if they just want to study. And okay, I will show more about this in a next slide. Okay. So also supporting distance learners, we realized that quite a significant amount of our students are still not able to come to Singapore, or so basically they're not able to come to Singapore or they're not able to come to campus. And so in an effort to help them, we are making sure that most of our course reserves will be electronically available, and limited manpower, as well as trying to creating a safer environment for both our users and staff. We are thinking of having more unmanned libraries 24/7 and to enhance our virtual services as much as possible with the potential of using robots. I will also touch on this more in another slide. Yes, so we are also quite concerned with engaging with our users remotely. They may not be able to come to campus anymore. They may not be able to come to the library anymore. So we are more concerned with our freshmen because they are not as familiar with the library. So we have a team specifically made for the freshman library experience. Okay, so this is kind of what our seat availability heat map kind of looks like. I'm not sure if you can see. I think you might have to zoom in. So this is a screenshot of what it looks like. Usually in the afternoons, our most popular libraries will be filled up. Yeah. Okay. And right. With our project on unmanned libraries and virtual services, we are looking at customer service robots. We have already identified one that we are very keen on and we think is quite fit for purpose. It is currently actually being used at the National Gallery in Singapore, which is why we did a site visit. And we actually had a chance to talk with the project manager who brought it in and how they are piloting, what is the users' perceptions. It's currently being used in the National Gallery as a tour guide to bring them around, bring users around a specific exhibition hall. Yeah. So what we are trying to use this robot for is to welcome users and be able to guide them around the library, answer simple questions, possibly like relying on our FAQ bank. And it also has the functionality where it can connect users via video call to a librarian, presumably back in the office, so that users can still have that face-to-face interaction through a screen if they need this kind of help. Yep. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. If you have any questions or comments or points of discussion, we'll be happy to talk to you about them. And right now, I also like to thank Caroline, our university librarian, for all her guidance throughout this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. There have been two questions. First one by Eva Ramminger. Can you please explain once more the term of heat map?
Oh, okay. Okay, so the heat map it's not really a heat map right now. It's currently just seat availability. We are planning to use it the same in the future, same system in the future, to be able to show how many people are there in the library. So that people can judge whether they want to visit this library or not.
Okay, it's now clear for me. Thank you.
Okay, the next one was by Lars Egeland. I guess the university had a crisis management group. Was the library represented in this group? Were the university management occupied with crisis management in the library, or did you have to cope alone?
Okay, for the university, we do have a Office of Health Safety Emergency Office, and they are actually the one that handles all the crisis management in the university. And we do have safety officers that represented by a library staff. Myself, I'm one of them. So we do have a constant communication with this safety office. So if there's any instruction, any measures that we need to implement in the campus, including the library, we will be alerted immediately. And from then on, we will just take the necessary steps to implement all these measures.
Okay. Next question, please excuse my pronunciation. Daniel Akavasi Afrane. Did you record any positive COVID-19 cases among your library staff after the lockdown? If you did, how did you handle the situation to avoid panic and fear in the library?
So far there's no cases, COVID-19 cases within our library. So that's quite happy to say. But we do have, like I mentioned earlier, we do have some procedures. If any of our users in the library have some symptoms of this COVID, then we will have some plans. We have a quarantine area within the library itself. So we will then, of course, bring them to the quarantine space. Of course, for our own staff, we also have some procedures for them to cover themselves with masks and with gloves and everything to handle the users. So yes, we do have some plans if we have some users in the library that show some symptoms of COVID-19.
Okay, next one. Ulla Nygren asks, a very interesting presentation, thank you. Can you explain how the robots were taken in use?
Okay, so the robots are a current project. We still haven't acquired them yet, but we are planning to get one soon. And we will see how to use them. Basically, this is our plan right now. This is what we are planning to use them for.
We actually plans to maybe, if we were to implement one or two unmanned library, we'll have this robot station at that unmanned library to provide service. So you see that there's a small little screen on the robot. So it will then give us a like a Skype or like a face-to-face interaction with the users without us being in the unmanned library itself. And also, we can program this robot to actually bring users to various parts of the libraries. So if let's say the user says, I'm looking for some books or of this call number, so maybe we'll program it so that this robot would bring the user to the correct shelves where the books are located. So these are some of the plans we have for the robots.
Okay, David Thomas asked a question that relates to that. What is the customer service robot called?
The brand is Temi, Temi. Alan, do you have more info? Right?
Not really. We have not really come up with a branding or a name for this robot. Yeah. So,
But
yeah,
the
later on,
company itself is Temi. You can go and find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Next question by Anna Walek. Do you work stationary or remotely now?
All of us have been back at work since July. Yeah. So the entire library, almost the entire university has been back at work since July.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Ayanda Abelebele asks, how did you manage staff anxiety and stress or fear?
Well, before we go back to the campus, we did have a meetings and meetings with our staff to let them know that steps are taken to ensure that their safety when they are back to the library, and what are the safety measures they themselves have to take when they are going back to the libraries. So we give them a lot of channels for them to feedback or communicate to us if there are fear or there are some worries when they are concerns if they need to be back to the university. So I think on that part, to ensure that they are all not stressed or they don't fear going back to the university.
Mhm. Okay, please excuse the pronunciation. Quet Masesane asks, how long do you quarantine your returned items?
We quarantine them in the beginning. We quarantined them for 72 hours. That was based on some of the literature we read at the time. We have since changed it to 48 hours because we were getting a little bit of feedback that people couldn't access their course materials. And we are a little more optimistic about the situation right now, in Singapore at least.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. Thanks for the presentation. Can you please share which software or tool you're using for seat availability, and does it allow people to reserve seats?
So we are actually using Excel. We work very closely with our library technology team so that the Excel sheets actually are able to link to a system. I don't know it's like a website.
I think a server or something. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure about how the back end
update.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, to update
So,
it
but
real time.
it's actually an in-house developed software. Yeah.
It doesn't allow people to reserve seats. No.
Okay, next question. Via Yakuma asks, did you notice any variation in the usage of space and collections pre-COVID and now, increased or decreased?
That's
I think right
question.
now the usage of our space, I don't see a decrease in the numbers, although we did sort of limit the number of people that can be in the library. Because of that, we see queues forming outside the libraries. Students are willing to queue to wait for their turn to come into the library. So I don't think there is a decrease in the usage of the space inside the library. But in terms of collection, I don't have the numbers, but based on the books that are being returned every day, the users in the library, I don't think there is any decrease, definitely, in the usage of our space and collection compared to pre-COVID and now.
Okay. Matthew Moyo asks, what feedback have you received regarding your service offerings during this crisis period?
I think so far, because we do receive feedback regarding books that the students are holding right now. They can't return their books because of the lockdown and things. So we have steps in extending their loan period, waiving fines and all this stuff. So I think majority of the users or the feedback that we get from our users is that we actually take care of their needs during this period, and most of it are quite happy that we take steps to ensure that
safety.
The safety. They don't have to come back to the campus to return the books which are due and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, next question by Rainer Kallenborn. Do you have procedures in place to support following infection chains among library customers?
Do you mean our contact, like if one of them
Contact tracing, yeah.
contact
Yeah.
tracing? Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah. So the contact tracing system that we develop will be a good system for us to track the users, because we record the time they come into the library and the time they leave the library. So with this information and of course the safe entry that is being implemented by the government, we should be able to identify at certain point where or which students are actually in the library during a period of time.
We keep this information up to 21 days before we delete them, purge them. Yeah, so we can trace their movement if they come into the library at least, and we will help the university in its efforts also, because the university also has its own a contact tracing system on top of the safe entry to identify if a student went into a particular classroom or lecture hall.
Okay, the last question so far. Do you have procedures in... Sorry, this was the last question. Sorry, I overlooked this. So, and back to Anna Walek.
Thank you, Georg, for sharing this discussion. Thank you, Alan and Samantha, for a very interesting presentation. And if any of our colleagues have other questions for you, we'll have some time during the later. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Samantha.
Okay. Yeah,
and
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to...
Thank you so much, Anna. It's actually a great honor for me to come and speak to you today about the COVID experience. I'll be taking a slightly different tack than Alan and Samantha, because I'll be speaking not about the specific experience at my home institution, McMaster University. I'm going to be speaking more collectively about the experience across Canadian research libraries. So I'm actually hoping to do a little bit of time travel with you today. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about where Canadian research libraries were before COVID happened. Then I'm going to bring you to the period we currently are in, where we are facing COVID in all of its many forms, and it's consuming us night and day. But we'll talk about what the campus community how it's reacted to the services that we have delivered across Canada. And then we'll really talk about what our preferred future is in a period, hopefully not too far from now, not too long from now, when we actually emerge from the pandemic. And I'm hoping that you'll see yourself in the Canadian experience and hopefully can use some of these reflections to influence practice in your own institutions. So I'm assuming that I can move these slides. Good. So the English language uses a fairly common idiom to bite one's lip, and it actually means to forcibly stop yourself from reacting when someone says or does something somewhat irritating. And I would suggest that Canadian Research Library directors, and I would assume directors around the world, are finding themselves biting their lips a little bit when they hear their colleagues across the university express complete surprise when the library unveils some new service to help students and faculty survive the pandemic. And this surprise, which is based on a very narrow notion of what the library is capable of doing, is actually a key theme of my talk. So first, some Canadian context. Canada is the second largest country in the world by land mass, but with a population of only 38 million people, a large proportion of them living along the Canada-US border. We are known for our maple syrup, our passionate love of hockey, and our long, cold winters. The Canadian Association of Research Libraries, CARL, is the voice of Canada's 29 largest research libraries and 2 national libraries, all of which are reflected in this map. I'll note that it's over 5,000 kilometers between our most western member, the University of Victoria in British Columbia, and our most eastern member, Memorial University in Newfoundland. So Canadian research libraries, and I would argue libraries around the world, have been individually and collectively engaged in deep transformation for many years, all based on artificial intelligence, cloud computing, digitization, robots, big data, open science. And in doing so, we are pushing the boundaries of what senior university leaders traditionally think of as the library. Our colleagues in Research Libraries UK have very nicely described this as the digital shift. And a quick cruise through Canadian published strategic plans documents very clearly where we saw ourselves before the pandemic began. So of the 24 current strategic plans readily available on the internet, many of us were already expressing firm commitment to being responsive to our user needs and agile and user-centered and focused on advancing open in all its forms. And these are all very good virtues during a pandemic. And 23 of us were publicly committed to transforming our collections to meeting the emerging needs of 21st century scholars wherever they were. And 22 of us were committed publicly through our strategic plans on transforming our services. Manitoba talked about ensuring point-of-need library support, again, critically important during a pandemic. And finally, a few of us, even before the pandemic, were calling out the importance of health and well-being of our users and of our staff. Queen's University's plan talked about wellness, kindness, safety, and respect. Again, critically important during a pandemic. But then when I look at our actions, I wanted to be sure, were we actually walking the walk? And when I look at the level and activity of Canadian research libraries before the pandemic, I see the digital shift was very much in action. And so very, very quickly in recent years, most of us had opened up exciting new maker spaces. Many of us also were adding virtual reality or augmented reality labs to help students gain the skills necessary for the new marketplace. And many of us were building digitization centers and digital scholarship centers and data visualization labs to render large and very complex data sets. And many of us, my own institution included, were leading or co-leading the university's research information management systems, or sometimes described as CRISs in other parts of the world. And many of us were working together across the country to support research data management. We were edging into bibliometrics and knowledge mobilization. And then COVID hit. So Canadian research libraries, like libraries around the world, have been facing challenging times since the pandemic arrived. Librarians are planners. There's no doubt about it, but I don't believe any of us planned for this. Given the very large size of our country, as I was describing before, we are all at various stages in the pandemic, but the concerns are similar. I would say that, just looking across the country, most of us are still working remotely. We're not in the same position that Alan and Samantha were describing. We're much still closer to lockdown, I would say. So I tried to visualize for you what the Canadian experience has been in recent months. In March 2020, we did what seemed like the impossible. We closed our buildings and we sent all our staff to work from home, and most of them are still working from home. In April, we found ourselves leading our organizations through the challenging process of converting all of our services and collections to remote delivery. And most of those services are still being delivered remotely. The early parts of summer seemed a little bit quieter, but the build up to September, when our students started returning to class all remotely, all the learning is still happening online. The campuses are very, very quiet. That became a very intense period for us and our staff. And in recent weeks, as we're now edging into the early parts of November, the second wave of the pandemic is hitting Canada, and there's a sense of deep fatigue in our library staff as people realize that things are not going to be changing quickly very soon. Most universities in Canada are announcing that the winter term starting in January will be mostly online. My own president is saying probably the summer and spring will be the same, and it's possible we'll still be virtually online in September 2021. So it's a long process for us, but the sense of stress is quite high. So I believe Canadian research libraries have responded very well. Some of us, my own institution included, have signed legal agreements with the HathiTrust Digital Library to deliver what is known as the Emergency Temporary Access Service, or ETAS. And ETAS allows us to deliver electronic versions of every book in the Hathi collection, which we have a print copy of on our shelves as long as the stacks remain closed to the public. For my own organization, that means I can deliver 42% of my print collection to our users' desktop. Very important since there are no students in the buildings. Many of us move quickly to purchase additional electronic books and additional streaming video content to help our students who are all studying at home. We quickly set up curbside pickup services at most of our institutions. At my institution, users pull up to our shipping dock in their cars, and we put their requested books in their trunk. We are bringing small numbers of staff back, very small numbers of staff, in to scan and deliver book chapters to our users' desktops. We've moved the entire library reference and instruction programs online. We've opened up bookable study seats, somewhat similar, I believe, to what Alan and Samantha might have been talking about. This one many of us are using SpringShare's LibCal program to do this. And most of us are now rolling out appointment-based visits to our special collections, research collections, sometimes maps, data. Some, like Brock University, are using their 3D printers in their maker spaces to produce face masks and ventilator components for frontline health workers in their areas. My own library donated all of our unused computer cycles to Folding at Home, an international health research project working on COVID and other diseases. We've also set up remote access to much of the specialized software on our public machines so that students at home could use our copies of MATLAB, SPSS, and other specialized sources. And some institutions, like the University of Waterloo, have become actively involved with their teaching centers to convert hundreds and hundreds of courses to online delivery, dumping all of that library content inside the learning management systems. In some cases, we have chosen to leverage CARL, the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, to facilitate our work. We've issued valuable statements to advocate for student learning, including the very aptly titled document, "The Time is Right for Open Educational Resources." We have used this time to advocate for things that we think are really important to help remote learners. In other cases, we have worked through CARL to build tools to help conduct our work in a fully digital environment. In many cases, these tools were in production before the pandemic began, but were expedited for release because the need had become so great. Here I draw your attention to a data visualization toolkit released in April to help our libraries tell their stories in more digitally compelling ways. And a competency statement released by CARL in September helps CARL librarians identify the skills and their gaps to map out their own professional development. Note that vision and innovation, the ability to experiment in the context of a constantly changing environment, tops the list of our competencies. But I think it's fair to say that Canadian research libraries individually and collectively have accomplished some impressive pieces of work in the last 8 months. Most of us have been brought into the university's senior crisis management team, and I know that was a question for the last set of speakers. We have proposed reasonable solutions for opening up library services with a very strong focus on health and safety. But we've also helped our campus teaching centers drop course content into the learning management systems. And we've partnered with our campus technology units to loan out laptops and hotspots. We've been good leaders at the senior university campus table, but we've also been good teammates, and people have actually started to notice. But the reaction from our campus community, and especially from some of our senior campus leaders, has been quite telling. Many of us have heard senior leaders say, "I had no idea that the library could do that," or "I had no idea that the library would do that." And it's that strange kind of compliment that feels slightly insulting, but you can't quite put your finger on why. So why is this compliment a little bit annoying? And it's because research libraries have been managing complex digital platforms with millions of interrelated records for years and years. So why are people so surprised that we can spin up a seat booking system? And we negotiate complex licenses and batch load thousands of records in a few hours. So why are people so surprised when we can roll out new suites of products to meet the expectations of remote learners? And we loan out hundreds of thousands of physical items every year. So why are our colleagues so surprised that we could manage curbside delivery with a small fraction of the volume? But I think the truth is that some of our campus colleagues still harbor very traditional notions of what the library can do. And these notions are lodged in the days of the card catalog and print journals and quiet reading rooms. And it appears that we've written beautiful strategic plans that some of our senior leaders have never actually read. And we've rolled out exciting new programs, but they have not always been paying attention. They think that we're adjusting our course or that we are re-engineering the library to respond to the pandemic. But in reality, we aren't changing our direction at all. We're moving faster than we ever dreamed possible, but we're heading in the same directions framed out in those strategic plans and evidenced by years of steady progress towards digital transformation. So the pandemic is pushing our collective strengths into new prominence, but our colleagues are finally noticing. So in truth, the issue isn't why our colleagues have failed to recognize our past triumphs. It's what we do with the opportunities now before us. Now, Churchill famously said once, never waste a good crisis. And much as I hate to identify the upsides associated with a global pandemic, the situation is positioning research libraries for great success. And as my time with you comes to a close, I'd like to just leave you with 7 key strategies for leveraging the position we all find ourselves in today. First, I encourage you to look for opportunities to accelerate your mission in critical areas. Take a cold, hard look at your strategic goals and refresh them for the current environment. I encourage you to divert staff to the strategic projects that will make the biggest impact during this extraordinary time when remote learning is our key focus. Give your staff clear permission to drop the strategic projects which have lost their relevance since March or January of 2020. Second, I encourage you to make deliberate decisions to walk away from some of the antiquated policies and practices that you always wanted to divest yourself of. Drop work that no longer brings value to your remote users. Third, I encourage you to take an audacious and strategic approach to telling your library's story. This is the time to drop the humility. This is the time to take a deliberate and targeted approach to documenting your accomplishments to your users and specifically to your senior university leaders. Fourth, I encourage you to revisit your library's digital presence with a focus on the user experience. And I also encourage you to seek the assistance from professional colleagues to eliminate what we would describe as the library lens, viewing everything from our own eyes instead of our users. During periods of remote learning, your digital presence is actually the only presence that you have. Fifth, I encourage you to do everything in your power to firm up the new campus relationships you have made during the pandemic. Commit to monthly meetings with your newfound colleagues. Sixth, take care of your staff. Recognize the extraordinary challenges that they are facing, reimagining their work in new modalities, learning new technologies they had no experience with before, and balancing work and family. Be conscious of your staff's burdens and celebrate their achievements. And finally, I encourage you to take care of yourself, because the pandemic has forced us as senior leaders to be far more internally focused than we have been in the past. We have lost many of the opportunities that we would traditionally have to raise our eyes from our desk and to think about the profession and the academy from 20,000 feet. So cut yourself some slack and take an opportunity, take every opportunity that you can during this pandemic to interact with professional colleagues as you are doing today. And so Canadian research libraries have engaged in the digital shift for many years. We've committed to transforming through our strategic plans, and we've embarked on many, many initiatives to meet 21st century needs. And the pandemic has accelerated that pace of change, but it hasn't actually changed our direction. We're moving faster in many cases than we ever dreamed possible, but we're heading in paths we always intended. But this is an extraordinary opportunity to both surprise and to delight our campus colleagues now that we finally have their attention. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, either now or later on in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian, for this interesting presentation. We have some questions for you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we have questions. First of all, Eva Ramminger says, thank you for the very interesting presentation. And Lars Egeland says, it's so interesting to hear about both similarities and differences in hope we cope with the pandemic. Now to the questions. Anna Walek said, have you had problems with publishers making their ebooks available to more users?
That's an excellent question, Anna. And, you know, we have considered ourselves fairly lucky in a moderate way, because some of our publishers have been fairly responsive and they have given us some deals. The problem that we have had is that the deals always have very short expiry times. And so, you know, these vendors make great and very excited messages about how much they're helping libraries during this difficult time. And then they give us something that will last 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and it never quite lands at the ends of our term, like the school term. And so how can we use some of their products when they will expire, when the deals expire before the classes end. And so one of the things that Carl has done, and I know that you know, the library community as a whole has worked together through IARLA, the International Association of Research Libraries, to try and encourage the publishers to open up more content and to open it up for longer. But it really is an excellent question that I know I spend a lot of time talking to the head of collections in my own institution about which of the offerings, which of these lovely little gestures, is it worth us actually using? Because many of them, they're not as helpful as the publishers like to think. I don't know whether I've answered your question or not.
Okay. The next question is by Lars Egeland. I think we can agree that working remote is not deep digital transformation. It is a task for the librarians to make streaming lectures available for sharing.
I didn't quite get the question in that. I can say that at my own institution, the entire workforce is working remotely. I would say that some of them are really engaging in transformative actions, because they are rethinking their entire delivery, and they are making changes that will last long after the pandemic is over. In other cases, some of the work that our staff are doing is more of a stopgap measure, I would say. But I think some of it is truly transformative because we anticipate that in some cases we will never go back to some of the old ways, or there will always be some of the new. That as we head back into a face-to-face experience, that we will be offering blended versions of library services for the foreseeable future. So instruction will be, some of it will be face-to-face, but a large component of it will remain online because we anticipate this to be going on for some time, and that student learning behaviors may change over the course of the pandemic.
Okay. Eva Raminger asks, is the cooperation with HATI Trust based on a usual license or a special agreement?
That's an excellent question. It is a special agreement. So not all members of HATI, so my own institution has been a member of HATI for some time, many members across, across the world. Not all of them signed on to this special temporary access agreement. It required, in my case and most cases, the legal department of the university to analyze the agreement very carefully to make sure that the university would not be facing any kind of legal repercussions, because it's edging slightly into that area of controlled digital lending, that we don't want any publishers to come back and say, oh, you have contravened something. So we wanted to be absolutely sure that what we were doing was right. And so the concept is you only have access to the books that are locked away in your collection. And the moment you start opening up your physical collections to users, the agreement is over. And it's one for one. You have one book, you have one access.
Okay, a question by Anna Walek. How did you deal with assigning remote tasks for employees whose daily tasks are not closely related to remote work?
That is such a great question. So some of our staff, their work aligned very well. They could have been working remotely in the past. We have large numbers of people that are working in say digital scholarship. That's easily transferable. Some of our staff, for example, that were working on our service desks, delivering circulation and answering questions, that required more effort. So they were all diverted to doing chat-based reference. They were diverted to doing some of the other functions that were required to keep curbside pickup going. So, it's a fair bit of work, and to be managing the HATI agreement. And for those staff who still, they were not able to come up with a full day's work, they have been transferred to working on other projects. For example, working with our research collections areas to do transcription of archival material that will improve the findability of these records. So there's no end of work. Georeferencing maps to increase the findability of some of our map collections. No end of work. We created in my institution what's referred to as the job jar. So anyone who has a project that they would like others to work on, they put it in the job jar, which is a big Excel spreadsheet shared over Teams, and people sign up they take a tiny little bit of training, but as there's a lot of work to be done in research libraries as long as we pool our creativity and find work for everyone. So everyone has found work to do. And we just try and focus on them to focus on the work that is strategically important. That's the key.
Okay. Now a comment and a question by Vicky. It's an important point, Lars. Deep digital transformation involves cooperatively visualizing a new future, I think. Okay, this is more a comment than the question. Now the question, how can we be more persuasive with senior university leaders if they don't read our strategic plans?
That is such a perfect question, and I'm really I'm so glad that you asked it. I think it's actually the crux of the issue. I think in libraries we tend to talk to each other too much, and sometimes we frame all of our writing and we frame our some of our thinking through a library lens, and we need sometimes to have individuals that are that come to us with a fresh set of eyes that can help us translate the library's activities into the language that makes sense to senior leaders, and it's an effort. So, for example, in my institution, I have a communications manager who comes from television and journalism, and so she will work with us to do that translation, because if we speak with too much jargon, we lose our audience, and I think that's really the crux of the matter. But the other piece is being at the right table, and that's what I've noticed myself. And I'd say most of the Canadian directors are sitting at the university's crisis management table, and it's that interaction, being at the table when things are discussed, where you start to open up people's minds, because they somehow thought that the library would only be able to speak about library issues. And in fact, we have a lot to offer the university in terms of what we know about student learning, what we know about copyright, what we know about so many things. But you have to be at that table to be able to get that message across. So I think it's a combination of translating library language into lay person's language, and being at the right table. It's such a great question. Thank you so much for asking that.
Okay. Brenda van Wyk wants to know which RIMS system is being used.
Sure. So at McMaster, we use symplectic elements and Vivo combined together. I believe that at least one institution in Canada is using Pure. I think Donna Bourne-Tyson is on from Dalhousie. She's using, now I've lost, maybe Donna can put in the name of the one that she's using. So there's a few different RIMs being used across Canada. There's been some really good studies done by OCLC that look at RIMs or CRISPs and which ones are used, and showing some variation across geography. But I'm happy offline to give you any information you would like about our particular implementation. I will say, it has been the calling card. It has put the library at the table, because once you get involved in delivering on the university's research infrastructure, you are now a very critical member of the senior team.
Okay. A question by Jolanta Wrobel. Have you observed increasing interlibrary loans from the libraries, smaller than yours, which do not have so many e-resources? Do they have to pay for that?
Jolanta, it's an excellent question. I'm afraid my answer will not be maybe as helpful as you would think. Interlibrary loan is mostly not happening in many parts of Canada right now, only because so few of our staff are actually in the libraries to actually pull books. So we talk about that concept of two hands clapping. You need to have both you need to have library staff at one center to ask for the item. Then you need the library staff at the other center to actually retrieve and deliver. And so there's been virtually no interlibrary loans going on other than digital loans. So sending digital files back and forth, we're doing a lot of that. There's conversation across my province right now about reintroducing interlibrary loan. But some of the biggest players, you talk about net lenders and net borrowers, stores, many of us who are the net lenders, so the bigger shops, we are so busy with curbside pickup to our own campuses. We don't have the capacity right now to start doing interlibrary loans, because it would require us to bring too many more people back to staff to campus, and our campuses are mostly locked down to protect the staff and the students. So I wish I could give you a better answer, and maybe if you ask that question 2 months from now, I would have a much better answer. So sorry.
Okay. The next question by Ayanda Lebele. We have resorted to going ahead with our plans, even if leadership seems lost. We know where we want to go. This is a good comment.
That is great, and I think knowing where you want to go is so important. But I think we also have to try and find ways of bringing our senior university along with us. Once we can pierce that barrier so they actually understand what we're doing, their eyes just become so, they realize that the library is a treasure, that they are sitting on an incredible treasure that they had just not fully realized. The library has so much to offer the university. We have got so much expertise. We just need to continually remind senior academic leaders of the expertise that's sitting within the library.
Okay, now the next things are thank yous to you. So, for example, Gintari Covet. Oh, sorry, I can't spell.
You have the hardest job, George.
Thank you. Excellent and inspiring presentation. Ulla Nygren, thank you. Very inspiring. Brenda van Wyk, thank you, Vivian. Would like more info. Eva Ramminger, the presentation was so inspiring. I'm already looking forward to go through it at a later time. Thank you very much. And Donna Bourne-Tyson says, we use UniWeb by Proximify. Thanks for the shout out, Vivian, and for the great presentation.
Oh, you're welcome. My hope was just to inspire you a little bit. And I hope that my approach from 20,000 feet has been helpful in even a small way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Georg, and thank you, Vivian, for this very inspiring presentation and a lot of information we just knew. And now it's time for the coffee break. It depends on which, or maybe breakfast or lunch. It depends on the different part of the world you are. And we will meet in 30 minutes, 27 minutes, at 3 o'clock Central Europe time. So grab coffee and come back to us. In the Central Europe, so we can start the second part of our first session of the Director Summit in Innsbruck. And I can see that the next presentation is ready. And I would like to welcome Antonia, Francis, and Daniel from Balma Library, University of Ghana. And our presenters are from the University Library. And they are representing Reference Services Department, Student Reference Library, and the Digitization Unit in Balma Library, University of Ghana.
We are presenting on the topic, the strategy for the resumption of on-site operation in the University of Ghana library system amid the coronavirus pandemic. And my team, or the team of presenters, are made up of myself, Antonia Bernadette Donko, Mr. Francis Yabua, and Mr. Daniel Afrani. So the outline of our presentation, we have an introduction And then we have the coronavirus pandemic, that's the UJ story. We'll look at our reopening strategy, and then we'll discuss the draft plan, and then how the plan was communicated to staff of the various libraries under the UGLS, the implementation of the plan, and then some changes in activities that have been engineered by the coronavirus pandemic. And then we'll walk you through a few pictures we have put together. So by way of introduction, a little bit about the University of Ghana library system. It's actually made up of a number of libraries, with the BAM library being the main library or the headquarters. And then we also have 7 satellite libraries. We have hall libraries, college, school, institutes, centers, and departmental libraries, all scattered in and outside the university campus. And these libraries are endowed with various information resources. We have good IT infrastructure, if I can say, and then we have expert staff to help assist staff and students in the use of our resources. And then libraries under the UGLS, that's the University of Ghana library system, were undertaking their normal duties and activities until the pandemic struck in the University of Ghana. So we are going to go through the UG story of the pandemic. Our first case or confirmed case of the coronavirus in the University of Ghana was recorded on the 12th of March 2020. Actually, that's in Ghana, sorry, was recorded in March 2020, and the whole nation was plunged into chaos. Everyone was panicking. News about the pandemic was flying everywhere, and it wasn't a good experience for Ghanaians at large. Fortunately, unfortunately, on the 15th of March 2020, the Public Affairs Directorate of the University of Ghana also released a communique that stated that one student who had just returned from an international trip had tested positive for the virus. And so there were restrictions on campus immediately. Residents or staff and students residents on campus were asked not to go out of campus, and those who were also not residents on campus were asked not to come onto campus for a period of 2 weeks, so that that's the incubation period for the virus, so that in case anybody has contracted the virus, the symptoms may begin to show. The very next day, on the 16th of March 2020, the government of the Republic of Ghana also issued a directive which indicated that all universities and schools in Ghana should be closed indefinitely. Ghanaians at this stage were full of fright. Everyone was panicking. We were home. We resort to prayers and encouraging words to be able to manage the pandemic. And then on the 21st of March 2020, the University of Ghana Public Affairs released another communique that exempted the University of Ghana library system from its essential services, meaning that our doors were to be shut, all libraries were to be closed indefinitely. And so we had to look out for ways of meeting the needs of our clients from home, if I can say. Okay, so this for about a period of 3 months, Ghana remained on partial and total lockdown. So along the line, there was a communique from the government in his usual state addresses to the nation, which hinted that the government was having stakeholder engagements with was having discussions with stakeholders on the possibility of reopening schools in Ghana. So immediately the management of the University of Ghana library system decided to constitute a 9-member committee to plan a reopening strategy. And this committee was made up of the heads of the various satellite libraries. There are 7 satellite libraries on campus, and then the head of the reference services library of the main university library, that's the BAM library, and a co-opted member. So the mandate of this committee was to put in place a plan for the safe occupancy of our libraries under the UGLS. So immediately this committee took up the task, and then we organized meetings. We had 3 meetings virtually using the Zoom app, and then further discussions were undertaken on the WhatsApp platform that was created for the purpose of this reopening strategy. So after a few weeks, about 2 to 3 weeks, a draft plan entitled Library Reopening Plan for Safe Occupancy and Use of Libraries in the University of Ghana Library System was released. And then this plan was communicated to other members, that is, other heads of sections who were not part of the 9-member group, in order to solicit their ideas. And the plan was made up of opening or working hours. Because of the pandemic, we had to change our opening hours. Initially, we used to work from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., and this had to change to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily. And we still review our opening hours based on what is going on around us in the University of Ghana. And then it also looked at access, that's entry into access controlled areas of the library. We had to disable some biometric entrances to avoid people from touching doorknobs and handles, and even having to put their fingers on the biometric machines for the doors to be opened. And then we took into consideration our seating capacity. We had to drop down our seating capacity drastically because we had to observe the social distancing protocol. So seats were arranged at a 1 meter distance apart, and then we had to put some posters and labels on seats, deterring people from sitting or occupying them. And then we also had to look at services that could be provided during this pandemic. And then even with our return to campus, the kind of services we could render to staff and students. And then we had to look at keeping safe. That's keeping staff safe, keeping users safe. So under keeping safe, we looked at the protocols that we are going to put in place. We looked at the equipment we need, and then all others. We also gave staff training. We gave we organized a sort of a DEBA to be able to allay the fears of staff, and then we provided personal protective equipment. And so there was a proposed budget that we at the end of the day, we proposed a budget for this whole plan to be made a reality. So like I said initially, the draft plan was communicated to other senior members or heads of libraries through mail, because we couldn't come into contact physically, for their ideas. And then this was done to make everybody feel part of the plan, because it's easy to implement a plan everyone feels they have contributed to, so that it reduces resistance to the plan. And then at the end of the day, the committee submitted this plan to the university librarian for further discussion and approval. And from there, it was also it was communicated with the vice chancellor of the university, and then it was approved into a working document. So fortunately for us, on the 15th of June 2020, the library had the opportunity to reopen. And like I said, before we reopened, looking at the implementation, heads of libraries were tasked to discuss the plan with their various units. And so most heads did that through Zoom meetings and the use of WhatsApp to be able to allay the fears of staff. and to reduce possible resistance to the plan, and even to the fact that we are coming back to work in this pandemic. So before the libraries were also opened, the management of the university library made sure all libraries under UGLS were disinfected. And then this was also a way to allay fears, because we knew that they disinfected the place, and so in case of anything, the virus will die off before we come to work. And then very basic personal protective equipment were provided. Staff members were provided, especially in BAM library, with at least 3 nose masks, reusable nose masks. Before we began work from the 15th of June, we were given hand gloves, some had face shields, etc. And then we had the university hospital also giving us a few tips on how to stay healthy within the pandemic. And then we also instituted protocols, all protocols to be observed either entering the library or even within the library. And I'll speak more to the protocols when we get to our pictures. And then we adhered a lot to social distancing, and the notices of precautions were displayed at vantage places within the library, such as put on your nose mask at all times, wash your hands regularly with soap and running water, etc. And then before the library opened to the university community, the Pro-Vice Chancellor Academic and the UG Covet Task Force, there's a Covet Task Force in the university, they came around our libraries to make sure everything was intact before we were given permission to open. And more of that also in the pictures to come in some few slides. And then we had to actually change some routine activities within the library. Certain things we weren't doing initially before the COVID, we had to start doing them. For instance, entry into the library, we had to make sure all staff and users put on their face mask before they enter the library. And then there's an outlet where you wash your hands with soap and running water before you are allowed entry. And to make sure staff and users adhere to these protocols, there's a security man at the entrance ensuring these protocols are adhered to. So after washing your hands, your temperature will be taken, and if it's within the acceptable range, you will be allowed usage, or you'll be allowed entry into the library. And so for the temperature, we look at between 35.6 degrees to 38.3 degrees. If you are within the range, you'll be allowed. If not, you'll be asked to wait, and then the university hospital will be alerted to give you some assistance. And then there's also a sanitization booth that has been installed where users walk through and get sanitized. It sanitizes the whole body from head to toe before you are allowed entry into the library. So after the sanitization, there's a documentation desk, that's a front desk that has been created, which didn't used to be there. And so here your details are taken, that's our contact tracing details. So depending on the kind of user, if you are a staff, you have certain details you have to provide. If you're a student, you have details. And among these details, we take your name, we take your ID number, and then your location, where you are residing, if you're on campus or if you're outside campus. And then we also take your phone number so that we can easily contact you should there be the need for contact tracing. And so after going through all these protocols, you are then allowed entry into the library. And then our seating arrangements have also changed because of the social distancing protocol. We are sitting at least 1 meter apart. So some seats have been tagged, do not sit here. Others have been tagged, reserved. And we make sure that students and staff do not sit at these designated places so that we can be able to maintain social distance within the library. Okay, and then when it comes to our library services, there have been some changes in our library services. Right now, most people or staff and users have been encouraged to use our e-resources so that we can reduce the number of people visiting the library physically. And then when it comes to our circulation of materials as well, that's charging of materials, have also been restricted. These days, we are attending mainly to staff and users of the university. So if you are not a staff or if you are not a user, a student of the university, you are restricted. And then for discharging of materials, it's still ongoing. And then with that, during the lockdown, for instance, between March and June, some users who had borrowed materials had fines to pay because the materials were overdue because we were home for 90 days. But because it is no fault of theirs, management has given us the opportunity to waive these fines. And this is also encouraging people to return their materials, because if not, students will tend to keep them for a long time, and then it means the library is also going to lose out on these materials. And then we are also isolating our materials that have been returned. That means when users return materials from home, we do not incorporate them into our collection immediately. These materials are isolated for about a week or two before we send them to our waiting shelves for them to be shelved. And then if I should talk about staff coming to work, these days we are running a shift program or a shift, we are going on a shift. And like I said earlier, our opening hours keep changing. Currently, the library is working from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's for this month of November, because most students are finished with their work and the library is not highly patronized. But in October, we were working from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So we are also running this flexible working hours, 1 week on, 1 week off. So these days, staff have the opportunity of having more rest and then working at home in order to keep healthy. So please, at this juncture, I'll walk you through some pictures we have gathered. And this was the Pro-Vice Chancellor's visit with the Covet team to assess the readiness of the library to open. That's on the June 15th, 2020. And this is the entrance of the BAM library. You can see our hand basin and our tank for hand washing. And that's the security man with the hand sanitizer and another staff member assisting him. Okay, so when you get to the entrance of the library, you wash your hands. And then after washing your hands, your temperature is taken. If it's within the acceptable range, then the security man gives you a little sanitizer to sanitize your hand before you move to the next phase. And that's Pro-VC during the tour of the library to assess its readiness. So this is the sanitization booth I talked about. After you do your hand washing and you take your temperature, you are allowed or you are directed to walk through the booth. And it has 3 openings. There's one at the top, there's another one to your left and one to your right. That's where the sanitizer, the fumes come from, and then it's able to sanitize the entire body. So from that, you move to the front desk where your details are taken. So that's our university librarian, Professor Perpetua Adazi, interacting with our Pro-VC academic when they came. So you can see on the table, we have our hand sanitizer, and these are the forms we complete. The forms you complete with your details are done here. And before you are allowed entry into the library. And this is our reference section. And then we also tried very much to avoid people touching the desk and all that. So we put up some of our posters here, do not touch. Please stand behind the line. We put a barricade there so that at least we can also observe the 2 meter, the 1 meter social distancing rule. So this gives a better picture. So there's a line here. You have to stand behind it. We put some sellotape on the floor to also show that we had this also there, so that people do not come too close to the staff at the reference section. So here the Pro-VC academic was interacting with the reference librarian. Myself here, since you can't see me, there I am now. And then this was our KC, that's the Knowledge Commons. It's a place for our undergraduate students. They have access to use their computers here. It's a place, it's a lab, it's a computer lab. So they were assessing our social distancing rules and all that. And this the Pro-VC academic interacting with some students who were using the facility as at the time they visited the place, to find out if they are okay with the services being provided. So in conclusion, this pandemic has not been easy for everyone, but we thank leadership and management of the University of Ghana Library System for being able to steer us adequately and steadily through the pandemic. Actually, because of the discussions and the education were given, staff fears were allayed, and when people came back to work, they were able to work effectively. And then all safety protocols and precautions were also put in place adequately. And then through this pandemic, different new ideas have come up that the library is trying to enforce to be able to help us serve the university community better. So this is our presentation on how we managed to reopen our libraries for on-site operation. Thank you for the audience.
Okay, there are quite some questions. If you don't mind, I'll stick to first names due to my inability to pronounce the names correctly. So Anna asked, did you have to introduce additional rules regarding the collection of user data, such as telephone number?
Okay. Yes, please. At the contact tracing desk, we had to add telephone numbers to it, and then places of residence. So, for instance, if you are a resident on campus, you indicate the exact hall, maybe Volta Hall, Commonwealth Hall. If you are a resident outside campus, you need to state the exact place. For instance, Adenta, social welfare, etc. So we collected all that data to make contact tracing possible should there be the need.
Okay, next one was Lars. My experience was that it was easier to lock down the library than to open it up, due to a lot of distress among the staff. We wanted them to feel safe, but too many rules could also increase the distress. Did you experience that making a plan for opening up was a little like hunting a moving target because everything changed from day to day? That you had to change your recommendations after the plan was launched.
Yes, very, very true. Going through and developing the plan was actually not a very easy task, because around that same time, everyone was kind of panicking. We were even wondering if it was safe to reopen and all of that. But like I said, basically every month we assess the usage of the library, and it determines even our opening hours. So the plan keeps changing. We try to make sure we do not allow too many people into the library, and then we also do not make staff interact too much with the users. So we've also put in place some services, online services, such as a chat with the librarian, ask a librarian, so that some services can be provided online to restrict contact with staff as well.
Okay. Anna wants to know, is the sanitation booth safe for clothes and equipment as laptops and so on?
Okay. Thank you for the question. Yes, it's safe for clothes. Actually, from what I have seen, not talking from a technological perspective, though, it's just like the hand sanitizer, the liquid hand sanitizer. And because they come in with their backpacks, with the computers or laptops in the backpack, it doesn't really affect them. But we are able to sanitize the whole body. And then I think it's safe. It doesn't even leave too much moisture on the body or clothes. So walking through it is quite safe.
Another question by Anna. What guidelines did you use to determine the book quarantine period?
Okay, we looked at from WHO, we were told or we read that the virus lives for about 6 to 7 days on paper. So based on some of the rules and information from WHO, we also crafted ours such that when materials are returned to the library, we keep them in isolation for a number of days before we send them to the waiting shelves. And sometimes, initially, we were applying the liquid sanitizer, but you realize you can't use too much of it on the book because you would end up getting the ink faded. So we just sanitize the book cover if it's possible before we return it to the waiting shelves for shelving to be done.
David asks, does the sanitation booth use a liquid spray or fog?
Okay, thank you. It uses liquid. It's liquid. From what I have seen, it's the liquid sanitizer.
Vicky's question is, could you tell us about your digital library offer?
Okay, for that, I wouldn't want to say too much now because it's in another presentation we are going to be given tomorrow. So it will mean I'm spelling out everything. So I'll just say, please let's hold on to this question. Join us again tomorrow, and then we'll take you through our digital library and the services we are providing as at now. We have a lot to share with you, please.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Eva Ramminger wants to know, what were the most challenging situations at your library during the COVID-19 crisis?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. One very challenging issue was we had a number of scares, if I can say. Along the line, we had the information or rumor that a member had contacted the virus, and so it wasn't easy for us. Everyone was panicking, but fortunately, the whole thing died out, and even the supposed staff is okay and is around and all of that. We experienced that twice. The second experience was around August. Actually, that was we were just preparing for our exams, and a few students were going to be using our computer labs, and the information came out again. So actually, management had to quickly fall on volunteers because we were all panicking. We didn't want to come to the library and all that, but thankfully, management was swift and then requested if any staff member would volunteer to work. So we had a team that volunteered to stay at work, whilst others actually had to take the Covet test with the university. But fortunately, everybody came out negative after a month. So the volunteers were at work the whole of August, after which they also went to take the Covet test, and then everyone returned to work. So presently we are running the 1 week on, 1 week off shift. It hasn't been that easy, but thankfully we are sailing through with the support of management.
So at the end, thank yous by Vicky. Thank you. I will looking forward to it. And Ayanda, okay. Thank you. It's great that most libraries seem to be responding in generally similar ways.
Yeah. Thank you too. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I can't seem to see the screen.
You have to present us right now. Can you advance?
Okay, oh, sorry. So you want me to share my... Right, sorry.
Does that work now?
Just...
If it doesn't, I can take over the presenter's rights and slide.
if you could, I seem to be struggling.
Okay.
Was that you on the screen or was that me on the screen?
I thought it was you, but I took.
Okay.
Shall I advance the slides for you, or you?
Right. Can you see? And is that you that has the PowerPoint?
That's me now. Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Really bad.
No problem at all.
Okay. So if you could do it, that would be wonderful.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria from OB, and as we said, I'm the Executive Director at the University of Johannesburg, and it is a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I'm going to share with you some ideas of leadership through a crisis, and these are ideas that we have developed in the library at UJ, and also ideas from a lot of different reading that we have been doing, thinking about leadership in a crisis. I started by calling this paper Leadership in a Crisis, but we've added a section on growth and gratitude, because as we've been reflecting on this year, growth and gratitude seem to be two of the things that have come out of this year. I'm going to look at three different ideas, and we are looking at these ideas in relationship to different phases of a crisis. So in the first phase, we're looking at the idea of care. And what does care mean, and why is care important? And I'm going to unpack what we mean by this. As I go through the presentation, I will be giving examples of what we were able to do at the University of Johannesburg, and hopefully share some ideas of what you might be able to do in your own environments. If we can go to the next slide, thank you. The second phase that we felt that we went through was a phase that we have called need, looking at what are our needs and addressing those needs, and what are the different needs that we have in order to flourish. So we know what a plant needs. It needs sunlight, it needs water, it needs soil, it needs air. But what do we need in a time of crisis, especially when we're working from home and our staff needs have changed? We can go to the next slide. And finally, we see the third phase of a particular crisis as a phase of risk. And if you get the risks right, you can be like this young boy and make it across to the other side. But how do we get there? So the next slide. Right, so the first part of care is communication. I think that this is probably something that we have all experienced, the importance of communication during lockdown and the way that we have communicated differently. What we tried to do in our team was to really have positive reinforcements. So at the beginning of lockdown, which happened for South Africa on the 24th of March, and we went into what we called a level 5 lockdown, where you weren't even allowed to leave your property for exercise The only time you could leave your property was if you were going to buy essential foods. So for 7 weeks, it was really isolating, and communication became very important. Of course, we were communicating on platforms that we weren't used to, like Zoom, for example, or MS Teams. As an executive team, there are 9 of us in our executive team. We met every day, and this was essential for 2 reasons. One, as you have been experiencing in your environments, things were changing all the time. And so you made plans, and then 3 days later, the plans had to change. But for me, what was particularly important was that we had to give clear direction. And all the articles that I was reading were pointing in this direction. In a time of crisis, communication is essential, but that communication needs to be uplifting. It needs to calm people's fears, and most importantly, it needs to give clear direction. Well, clear direction wasn't always possible because we didn't really know what was going on. Nobody in South Africa knew, nobody in the world knew how we were going to handle this particular crisis. We also needed to give clear direction around how to communicate in the different spaces and environments so that communication was upbuilding, uplifting, and wasn't detrimental, hurtful, or spreading further anxiousness and unease. Next slide. The second part of care we felt was assessing the situation. I love this little slide. What's the opposite of assessment? Ignoring it, neglect, help, guess, give, abate, diminish. For us, what was important was continuous check-ins, continuously checking in with different people. So our broader management team met more often, and we had many shorter meetings, but we had many more meetings so that we could continuously assess the situation. And part of what we were assessing wasn't only to do with how the library was working, but also how our staff were coping with the situation. People were feeling anxious, and we did a lot of work to alleviate that anxiety. And one of the things that I did was to send out a daily short video that people could watch on WhatsApp, which just gave encouragement, gave people tips on how to work from home, because we quickly learned that a lot of people were struggling to manage their time, struggling to set up how to work from home. And in all of this, we were giving clear direction, what was expected today and what was expected for this week. And that was about as far as we could plan. Next slide, please. The third part of care was to respond, and to respond quickly and relevantly. In a crisis, it is so easy not to respond, but to react. And by having continual assessments, continually checking in with staff, we were able to assess situations, breathe, reflect, and respond to them, not react to them. And in this way, continue to give clear direction. And the next slide. The fourth part of care we felt was empathy. Empathy was really that we were leading with the heart and the head at the same time. I don't know what it was like in Ghana, but it sounds like it might have been similar to our experiences in South Africa. People didn't all have devices. So the university, when we went into lockdown, didn't make sure that every staff member had a laptop, although they ensured that every single student had a laptop. We were all given data, but in South Africa, in one area like Johannesburg, we have different geographical pockets where connectivity is very good and other areas where connectivity is very bad. And on top of all of this, we had what we call load shedding, And that's when the country is using too much electricity. And so the electricity suppliers stop providing electricity for 4 or 6 hours to certain areas. So you can imagine what that did. Not only did we have poor connectivity, people had problems with data, but on top of all of that, we also had load shedding. In all of this, we felt that it was particularly important to continue to show empathy, not to get frustrated with other colleagues when you're in a Zoom meeting and all of a sudden you can't hear what they're saying, or when their connectivity is really bad and you struggle to understand them. So in all sorts of different areas, we had to show empathy. We then had several colleagues who got ill with COVID, and that was also a challenge. And it was particularly a challenge because people had a certain stigma towards COVID. Yet we had to let everybody know in the library that this person was ill because you might have been in contact with them, and then you too had to self-isolate. So while people could remember who they had been in contact with the last 2 or 3 days, and we did track and trace, you might forget that you'd actually had a conversation with somebody in a lift, for example. Not a long conversation, but in a confined area where it was easy to spread the disease. So in the first 7 weeks of COVID, we didn't work on campus at all. And then we started to go back, very small groups of people working. And we have 5 libraries over 4 campuses. And we only had 1 library open a day, so we could minimize the risk. Very, very few students were coming onto campus. And so this worked out for us. The next slide, please. But then we found ourselves moving into phase 2. Lockdown was now no longer so severe. More people were coming back onto campus, and we were beginning to think about what is the new normal. In this phase, we have really found that need was essential. Noticing the need of people. Notice the small things. The rewards are inversely proportional. In other words, noticing that somebody was not connecting on the WhatsApp group. We had a library-wide WhatsApp group and then WhatsApp groups in our different divisions. We went online, we did a lot of training online in April, May, and the beginning of June. We trained thousands of students. In April and May, we trained over 9,000 students every month. We've never trained as many people as we did this year. We have continued to deal with the same number of queries as we did last year. And our electronic resources have obviously gone through the roof. And we have had an increase of about 34% overall in our electronic resources. For us, it was important to notice where people were at and to connect emotionally with people, because in the online space, we found it was very easy to tell people to do things. It's very easy to send an email. It's very easy to send a WhatsApp, but it's not easy to connect. That sort of connection that you have in the tea room or over the water cooler, all of that fell away. And how then do we be supportive of one another? The next slide, please. The second part of need was to engage with challenges. And we had multiple challenges. As I said, for me, the biggest challenge was that the university did not give every staff member a device. And so myself and our IT people went about trying to solve this. And we bought laptops for all the staff. But there were all sorts of problems bringing things into the country, problems formatting everything, problems with our higher ups in the university who didn't want us to spend money on these laptops. So we had lots of these challenges. But we felt that with all these challenges, people could grow. One of the things that we did was to do a staff survey. This was something that the staff chose to do, and this enabled us to see where are the shortfalls. And so we started to run a whole lot of staff development programs, as well as doing the training for the students. We have focused particularly on trying to develop our learning commons, research commons, general librarians, and they've become part of our faculty library teams. And they now help with the online training, they're helping with some of the basic queries, and so they've really been able to grow during this time. The next slide, please. A big part of all of this has been to encourage each other. Underlying all of this, we found as a management team that we needed to be very clear about our expectations. Now, we were quite fortunate because our academic year begins in January and it ends in December. So in about June, when people were starting to come back to work, we had our mid-year reviews. And these mid-year reviews for our key performance indicators, we used very differently to the way one normally does. We asked people questions like, what are your challenges? What are you struggling with? What have you been able to learn? What do you want to learn? And in the second half of the year, we were able to get most of our staff, particularly people like circulation staff and shelving staff and admin staff who weren't that busy, to do a whole variety of online courses, especially through Coursera. And this was really an important way to encourage staff to develop themselves. So not to sit back and let COVID take over and be worried about COVID, but rather use this COVID time, especially the time where you are not on campus working as a circulation staff member, to develop yourself, to grow, to do things you had never thought you would be able to do. The next slide, please. And lastly, we developed a whole variety of interventions. Part of these interventions were through learning, as I've discussed, and skills development, but also interventions in stepping alongside people who were struggling. And a lot of what we did was to try and, like this picture, create makeshift ways to get through problems. So one thing didn't work, we tried something else. One of the interventions we were the most proud of was that we had over 400 textbooks that staff said students needed for the June exams. We couldn't find any form of electronic version. And so in our level 4 lockdown, staff came on campus, they scanned books. Because of copyright, we would scan edition 1 of a book, and then we would go to the second edition and scan other parts of the book. And we were in constant communication with the academics. Which versions should we use for which parts? And we got all of this up and online, and it was a major job. At UJ, in the June exams, our students overall did 2% better than last year. Now, one of the reasons for this is because students had better access to information. And one of the things was being able to access textbooks online, because so many textbooks were made freely available by varying different vendors, but also because we made a whole lot of things freely available online through our scanning project. And then, of course, because academics were very involved in helping their students through this crisis. The next slide, please. So the third phase, which we feel we are in South Africa at the moment, where we have now gone to our summer, and so we are really experiencing what much of Europe experienced through their summer, and that's a lifting of lockdown. We still wear our face masks. We still have to do social distancing. We still have people rotating into work so that not everybody is there all the time. But overall in South Africa, there is a kind of sense that things are sort of going back to normal. And in this phase 3 of crisis management, we felt that the most important thing was to reflect. Reflect on what you've learned. At the moment, we are doing a series of reflective conversations with staff. So myself and my two directors are meeting with all the different teams, and we are hearing about people's experiences. It's an opportunity for people to share, and it's also an opportunity for us to really learn and appreciate where people have been, what have been the different journeys that people have been on. And from this, to really be able to inspire staff and inspire people to keep going. So the first thing about taking the risk, phase 3 we see as taking the risk to embracing the new normal, not just as an interim as we go through the crisis, but rather to transition to something new. And that requires the mindset of risk, taking those risks, being able to fail fast and fail forward. The next slide, please. So the next part of risk is to integrate. And this is something we are struggling with at the moment. Integrating some people working on campus, some people working at home, integrating new skills that people have learned. For example, we do an enormous amount of events. We have done 257 events online this year. For each event, we make a poster, we do all sorts of social media advertising, and some of our admin staff have been on courses to learn how to do posters, how to make all sorts of different forms of online communication. And now we are integrating these new skills in. And so there's a shift in the work that people do and a shift as well in job descriptions. And all of that needs to be managed. In this, we are trying to inspire staff to see all the positives that we gained from COVID, how we've grown and what we can be grateful for. The next slide, please. All of this has been hugely around the focus on skills development, staff development, developing ourselves and recognizing that this is an opportunity for growth and development. Development isn't always easy. And so as a leadership team, we find ourselves inspiring our teams to keep at it. Keep at it when it's difficult. Keep at it when you thought you knew how to do something and then it trips you up. But keep going. And the next slide, please. And finally, with risk, managing in a crisis. I read a report from McKinsey, and one of the things that they were suggesting is the importance of noticing where your staff are at, of noticing where your customers are at, where your patrons are at. What are the needs, and being agile enough to address those. For me, one of the big things is when we notice, when we become curious like these two little boys who have noticed a bug and are investigating it. When we have that curiosity, when we have that care, when we are inspired to see things anew and differently, that's when all sorts of exciting possibilities come alive. The next slide, please. So in all of this, I hope that my talk has given you some reminders of crisis management, reminded you of all the things that you have done so well this year as you've been helping your teams, and maybe given you one or two other ideas that you might be able to take with you. For us, the most important thing has been participative decision-making. We have met regularly, we've reflected, and we feel that that is what has helped us grow as a team. And we are, in some ways, grateful for COVID and all the opportunities that it has given us. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you. The first one is Anna. How did you deal with the difficult conditions related to the lack of electricity or equipment? How was communications with employees who did not have a laptop, etc.? And how did they perform remote tasks?
So, wonderful question, thank you. we've just finished our KPIs, and at the University of Johannesburg, you're supposed to have 40% of your staff or less getting a 3.5. We've got a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. Now, I have 60% of my staff in that curve. And the reason why is because people were remarkable. The way people used their smartphones, firstly, was just fabulous. We had one staff member who wrote an entire LibGuide for archives on his smartphone. It just gives me goosebumps. The staff were amazing. Amazing in their ingenuity, amazing in their willingness to stay connected. What we did at the beginning of lockdown is we knew that there would be a long 7 weeks and that people like the shelving staff and the circulation staff wouldn't have anything particular to do. So we put together a whole reading pack for them, and it included things like the Horizon 2019 report. Now, no circulation staff member has ever read the Horizon 2019 or 20 anything report. There are a few library directors who've read these reports in full. And people really engaged with this, and they did it over their phones. So they would read a section, and then they would WhatsApp each other, and do you understand this word? And what does this mean? And how do I understand that? And so they just created these amazing collaborative groups, and then started to use those same skills to help our students as they were struggling. So people worked late at night when electricity came back on. People worked early in the morning. It was remarkable, Anna, and just absolutely amazing, the dedication of the staff, because they knew that what they were doing was literally helping students. And in a country like South Africa, where our economy is so fragile, every year that somebody spends at university is not just 1 year where they're not earning money. It's a year where the family's savings have gone into helping this person survive and go to university. And an entire family is depending on them passing as quickly as possible. So everybody was working from that perspective. We are here to serve each other.
Okay, a related question by Eva. How did you succeed to integrate colleagues with different abilities to work at home?
Yeah, so that's also a great question. A lot of what we did was partly through sending out short videos that I did every day, which gave like a little bit of advice, how to manage your time. And then we did a lot of online webinars and training, upskilling people. And these, because we used Zoom, were platforms that they could access via their phones. So we were very conscious about doing everything so that people could access it on a smartphone. And really, this is why the staff audit was so important, because we really heard where people were at and were then able to give training. And again, you know, staff who needed training came to the party, and staff who had the knowledge were willing to give the training. And then part of what we started to do was to integrate staff into Zoom training that we were doing for students. So for example, we were doing something on plagiarism. And so staff who really didn't know anything about that started to be the back-end support, because if you've got 1,000 people in a Zoom room, you need somebody to manage that all the mics are off and all the questions. And Zoom bombing was also a big thing at the beginning. And by doing something very important, like just managing the mics, it's, I mean, essential if you've got 1,000 people in a Zoom room, these staff members also started to learn. So people now know things that they just didn't know before. And they've been working in the library for 20 years. And UJ is not unique. I mean, every library in South Africa, you hear the same sort of stories about just how amazing staff were and despite all these challenges, people really stepped up.
2 more questions. What kind of trainings did you offer for the students, the university staff? Did you have special requirements for courses from the university faculties?
So we were very fortunate with our training in that we have developed a really good relationship with the faculties, and had in the last 2 years been doing a lot more work to understand what the faculties needed. So for us, we didn't have to do new training. We just had to train on a new platform, which definitely made it easier. We trained everything from research data management through to very basic stuff, how to find resources, how to download an ebook. And then we made lots of 2-minute videos on how to find an ebook, how to download a journal article. And we were very clear in our communication about, if you haven't participated in this training, you need to start with a more entry-level training, particularly around things like managing your referencing. And yeah, it's across the board, kind of, you name it, we probably trained it.
Lars wants to know, how were you allowed to scan the books?
So, Lars, that's a very good question. We have a wonderful copyright officer who basically worked non-stop for 5 weeks, sending out requests to Dalro. And then, as I said, because we managed different editions, we were able to get by. And then with other things, we did have to ask lecturers, look, we can only scan 40% of this. You will need to find another source, and we're happy to source that for you and help you with that. But, you know, we can't exceed this 40%. So that was probably our biggest challenge. And I think our copyright officer was very happy when that process was over.
Okay. 2 thanks by Lars, very inspiring. And Matthew, thanks, Maria, for a very good presentation. The others, I think we can keep for the discussion afterwards.
Great.
So,
Thank you so much.
So Anna, will you please take over?
Yes, thank you, Maria, for this presentation. It was very inspiring and interesting. And yeah, we are running now the discussion after the first session of our seminar, our summit. And we have first question from Eva. And if you like to ask a question during this discussion, or make a short comment, please let me know with the chat, raising your hand or writing something on chat, and I will give you the floor. And yes, the first question from Eva is. How far goes the university in financing the needed infrastructure for home office working? And I think I will ask Maria for taking this question as the first one.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a difficult issue for us. What the University of Johannesburg did was to provide 600 Rand of data. And I'm trying to make the currency swap. So it's about 30 euros a month for data available to all staff members. And that went some way, but it definitely didn't cover the full expense for people. So we had a lot of staff, especially in our technical services, where they deal with very big data sets. Working at night because data is much cheaper at night, and it's faster because there are less people online. what we then did as a library was actually go into our reserve fund. And we have bought laptops for all staff. But we've had to go into the reserve fund because it's not something the university was prepared to do. So while the university was prepared to pay for laptops for all students and all lecturing staff have laptops, they didn't see the same necessity for any support staff. And I think that was a misjudgment on the side of the university.
Thank you, Maria. Vivian, will you take this question? Could you please answer this question as well?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the answer. I think this is a question also for everyone else here in the group. We are also here in Austria, in Innsbruck, we're also struggling with coping with the technical aspects of the crisis and the home office working we maybe are forced to do in the next months. Maybe it's still open. And we already had in the first period, in the first lockdown, a period where we were forced to work home. So we have maybe the very similar situation as you in South Africa, Maria. We also have valleys and mountains where the internet is not very quickly, and so we have very different qualities in working at home. And for me, the most interesting part is what do you do with, but you answered this question already, what do you do with colleagues that don't use the laptop, don't use computers in their normal lives, normal working lives, like staff that is working in the stacks, etc. And the question, as I just wrote it, how far does the university go with financing? Yes, but thank you for the answer. It's very helpful.
Could I jump in here, Anna? So one of the things that we did 2 years ago is we gave all our shelving staff, so the staff that work in the stacks, iPhones, and the iPhones have an app on them that read barcodes and help you to identify any book that is missing or misshelved. And so the staff had, over the last 2 years, been learning how to use these iPhones, and then they had learned how to do basic searches from the library catalog. So we were actually very fortunate that we literally had only 3 staff members who didn't have any exposure to technology and were not able to connect because they really didn't understand how to use technology.
These are great ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Eva. Is anyone from the speakers from the first session who wants to take this question and would like to comment? Vivian or Antonia, maybe? Okay, so maybe I would like to ask Lars, could you please make a comment from your perspective or ask a question, because you are very active at the chat?
Yeah, I was wondering, we are now going into the second wave of the pandemic. In Norwegian, we have this word dugnad, and that means when everybody comes out of their houses and starts to work together, and they are inspired, and we shall manage. And that was part of the first wave. And now it's part of the new normal. Will it be more difficult to engage the staff and the users in the months that lay ahead of us? That's a question to the panelists.
Maybe I can answer here also, because we just started a new lockdown period 2 days ago.
Yeah.
For us, we don't even know, at the moment, we don't know the consequences of this lockdown yet. We just started. The lockdown is merely for the time at night, but we also have restrictions when it comes to moving to online learning at university. We are trying to have open, or to leave open the reading rooms and other services at the library. What we see, but not at the library at the moment, but otherwise, we see that the people, the students, the people, everyone in the country is much more, how do you say, aggressive when it comes to restricting oneself. It's difficult because it's getting too long. Yeah, it's now for almost more than half a year that we live under restrictions, and it's not, the virus is not going away. So to say it simple. So this is difficult for everyone, and the how do you call this, the need to cooperate and to stay together is weakening, and this is a problem. This may also hit the libraries in a few days or months, in weeks.
Are there any situations in your libraries that staff members are afraid to come back to work, to work stationary?
Yeah, I can answer that. So we had 4 cases of people with COVID, and that required us to close down the entire library where there was somebody who had COVID for a week. And then people had to self-isolate for 2 weeks in South Africa. And so thankfully, we were working with small skeleton staff. So after the week of decontamination, we then had other people who could go into the library. But it has definitely led to a significant fear amongst staff. And when we went to our level 1 lockdown, which is what we're in at the moment, which is where we are sort of trying to be back to some kind of normal, there was a lot of fear from people coming back onto campus. And we're almost in the place now where people don't have enough fear. So we may well go into another wave. But I found myself really addressing people's fear as one of the key things that I would be doing in the many staff engagements that I had, because there was a lot of fear, and we had a lot of staff members who lost loved ones due to the virus.
Thank you for this answer. If anyone wants to answer this question, maybe, or make a comment. Okay, we also have a. Thank you, Maria, for your comment and for your answer. And we also have a question from Matthew. As you mentioned, you indicated that you have recorded a number of COVID cases among staff members. What has been the impact to service provision? I think this is the question for you, Maria.
Yeah, so as I said, we actually literally had to close whole libraries down. So when we went into a level 3 lockdown, and we were allowed to sort of reopen the library to limited numbers of people, initially the university wanted us to open all the libraries. And it was in those 2 weeks, in those first 2 weeks, that we had most of the cases. And then I said to the university management, we can't have all the libraries open because we literally had about 200 students coming through in a week. I mean, one of our libraries, we can have 10,000 students coming through a day. So, 200 students in a week there was just nobody. So we then closed the libraries and only had one library open for 1 day in a week. And that really helped us to keep the services of a library going. So there was places where people could come, they could use the computers, but people couldn't take out books at that point. Now they can take out books and return books again. But all the online services, we were then able to keep going, even though we had some staff in quarantine.
Thank you. Any other question or comment? Donna, could you ask your question? Okay, I will read it. Would any of the presenters like to comment on the value of library consortia and associations as a support while planning responses to the pandemic? I think I will ask this question to Eva, maybe. Could you please share your experience with the consortia and associations in Austria and Europe?
Yes, I think the role of the consortia was tremendous and very, very important. Here in Austria, we had the possibility to get in contact with the publishers, to get special conditions during the period of the lockdown to get to access more ebooks or larger bundle of ebooks just for this period of time, and this was very, very helpful for the provision of additional ebooks and also e-journals and databases.
Thank you. Samantha, maybe you would like to share your experience from Singapore?
Okay. I don't know how. As in, I also would like to hear what people would say about this, because we don't have any library consortia in Singapore, and the Library Association of Singapore there wasn't anything they did, but in particular with regards to this. So we really actually don't really have much to share about this.
Okay, so you were more like your own, yes? Each library and each university.
Yeah, basically, on we were doing it separately. We did like our friends in the other libraries, our colleague, in the other libraries, what they were doing and how they were doing it. If we found anything interesting, yeah. But by and large, everyone was
more like informal cooperation.
Oh yeah, it was more informal cooperation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. Maria, would you like to share your experience?
Yeah, so in South Africa, I think we benefited more from the work of the international consortia rather than our own South African consortia. They are working for better open access and transformative deals. But around COVID-19, they didn't do, they tried to do stuff, but the really big moves came from the broader international consortia and what people were able to manage in places like Canada, the US, and Europe.
Thank you, Maria. Vivian, would you like to take the floor?
I will try. Oh, you can hear me now. I've succeeded. This is exciting. I hope the question is the same question.
Yes.
I took the advice of a colleague and signed out and signed back in again. So, in Canada, the consortiums have been absolutely invaluable as a source of support for the directors, but also a source of action. I think about some of the public statements that have come out of CARL, and also the partnerships with ARL and RLUK and LIBER and the whole larger IARLA group has been really great in pushing some statements out, especially directed towards the publishers and how they can help us and help students. But we've also tried pushing statements out to encourage senior leaders at our universities to be considering the importance of students with disabilities so that they're not locked out of some of our advances, and also, to be considering the importance of open access, because we're sitting on this great opportunity. We can push open educational resources as a solution that doesn't require physical artifacts, and so that I just think the consortiums have been great. And the nice thing is you'll hear from another Canadian consortium tomorrow. There is a group that's going to be speaking about the great work happening in Ontario, which is one of the more populous provinces in Canada. So that's all I'll say about that. And I hope that was still the question.
Yes, thank you, Vivian. And Antonia, maybe you would like to share your comments with us? We can't hear you or see you. Okay, so I think this could be our last question, last comment during this discussion. Because we have to summarize our today's meeting, and I would like to thank all the speakers for the very inspiring and interesting presentations, showing us difficult and sometimes the same cases and experiences from different parts of the world. So it was very valuable for us, and thank you for all your input. And thank you for our colleagues who are attending this session. And I hope you had a great time, and you are very inspired by our presenters. And yes, I would like to ask you for coming back tomorrow. I would like to invite you for the sessions that will tomorrow that will take place tomorrow. First, we'll start at 9 a.m. Central Europe time, and it will be about the competencies. And the second will start at 10:30. And will be about services. So we are looking forward to meet you virtually tomorrow. And I personally thank all of you for being here virtually with us during this first day and first session of the Director Summit of IATUL. Thank you.
and have a good afternoon and evening or day. Thank you. Goodbye. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Anna. This was very great. Thank you. Thank you for guiding us through the afternoon, and see you tomorrow, fresh and beautiful again.
Great
Thank
job,
you.
for the organizing committee and for the host, because everything works perfectly, and yeah, you did a great job. So congratulations.